Ben, we're back for another episode of AI and You. Are you excited about this one?
Absolutely, Jeff. I look forward to this. This is the highlight of my week.
It's the highlight of my month because I mean, guys, I want to brag on Ben for a little bit because he brings together some amazing folks in the data and AI space. And boy, have we got a couple of great guests for you today. One will look the same, but her name's different. But we'll address that a little bit later. Ben, if I were to ask you what has caught your attention in AI in the past couple of weeks, anything jump to mind?
I think it is this. As I talk to corporations, it is this angst that is going from, "Hey, I'm so excited. What do I do?" to, and they've done a POC, and then they go, "How do I productionize this thing?"
That's
And
right.
it is really crossing that chasm is
Yeah.
not insignificant.
I think the word you used, angst, is the right one. And folks, are you experiencing this? So, what I'd love for you to do is, first of all, introduce yourselves in the comments, whatever platform you may be watching this show on. Tell us who you are, and this is a global audience, folks. So, let's go ahead and introduce and tell us where in the world you are. John Deegan for the win out of Chicago. Welcome. So glad that you're here, Johnny D. And so today we're going to talk about the highs and lows of AI solutions, the success stories, and where it's making big impacts. So, Ben, as we get into today's topic, why don't we introduce the team to our newest guest for the program? All right, with that, Paul Byer, we are so glad that you are here today. Welcome, and from Boston, correct?
You're correct, Jeff.
All right, well, we're so glad that you are here. We hear you're brand new to AI and don't know anything about it. No, it couldn't be farther from the truth. Your organization actually is pretty focused in this space from an analyst perspective. In fact, you bill yourselves as the Gartner for Gen AI. Why don't you unpack that a little bit and tell us about yourself?
Sure, Jeff. Yeah, so GA Insights, we're a startup, 17 people, and we focus companies to help them get value out of this amazing technology. And it's moving so fast. We finding a lot of feedback on our AI analysts, really helping companies in a vendor agnostic way. My background's been 25 years enterprise software, and we're ahead of the curve on the thought leadership side. We've had two of our papers published in Harvard Business Review, and are probably have 10 to 15 meetings a week with AI leaders.
That's incredible. Congratulations on those two posts. It's not an easy thing to get an HBR once, but you did it twice in 1 month.
Well, there's a real thirst. I think in part of your audience here, there's a thirst to learn how to get value out of this. And it's moving so fast, and people are looking for practical application, not just speeds and feeds.
That's right. That's right. Well, Regina, we're so glad that you've joined us today. We've got some history with you, and we're so glad that you have joined and to participate in this. And it's relatively early where you are, so you're really motivated. All right. So we have one more person who's part of our panel here today. So let's bring up. We couldn't get Reagan Avon, so we decided to get Reagan Bliley. So Reagan, welcome and congratulations on the new name and the new marriage.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back. This is one of my favorite topics. I've got an MLOps background, so I've been thinking about putting, machine learning into production for a long time. And so I'm really excited to talk about how the landscape has changed with Gen AI.
I love that. Now, and Gen AI is such a buzzword and such a buzz phrase that runs around it. And there's so much excitement and, as Ben said earlier, angst about it. And what we're going to do today is talk about some AI solutions that have gone well and what was required. And so we're going to talk today specifically about these solutions, how they came into market, what problems they were solving inside of an organization, what the life cycle was from beginning the process into production and farther. Now, in order to do this, Reagan, you're a strong voice in all things. How do we start the conversation globally inside of an organization? Talking about governance, talking about all of these things. That's not our topic today. It doesn't mean it doesn't need to be done, but we're going to assume that foundation has been set.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so we're talking about productionalizing and success stories. And I think what's so interesting about this topic is we're talking about realness, because a lot of the conversations are really high level, they're really conceptual, and people want to hear what's working, what's not working, how do we do this, how do we move out of pilot POC into something that people are using, getting value from. And so I'm excited to talk about that today. I want to touch on, if we can at some point, the first mile, last mile type of problems with AI, and really understanding and scoping these types of projects appropriately, getting out of that pilot phase and getting users to actually leverage these and measuring success. And I know we've talked about measuring ROI before, but really talking deeply about some of the hurdles that people run into as they wide scale some of these solutions. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, and having those KPIs defined on the front side helps then, of course, define the success capability or success results on the far end. And with a technology that's this buzzy and this exciting, a lot of people just jump headlong in and don't necessarily have that. Paul, we were talking before about an interesting stat of the experimental workloads that went into ChatGPT last year. Why don't you expound on that?
Sure, Jeff. Yeah, our research showed last year that, so you have to remember last year, most companies budgeted for recession. And then ChatGPT hit the wave in January. Everyone thought it was a cheat tool. And then we saw that 95% of all the stock gains in public market in the first half were from AI stocks. So companies were scrambling around to get $50,000, $100,000 for a pilot. Our research shows that 95% of all the Gen AI initiatives last year were for pilots, and mostly through OpenAI, through Azure for safety things, and only 5% are in production. So it was a real learning year, but a little bit like what Reagan was talking about. How do we take something exciting that the board liked at scale for 5, 10, 30,000 employees or our customers is a non-trivial task when we start looking at all the needs around responsible AI and some of the security challenges.
I think your stats around what's going on, or a lot of that happening in OpenAI via Azure, I've heard those same percentages echoed from the other cloud providers as well. That the big challenge is how do we get people out of piloted and into production?
Yeah, and I think it's non-trivial. I mean, I think one challenge is we've seen companies, because it's so transformative, the challenge they have is they're looking at 40, 50, 80 different project ideas. They've got McKinsey and Bain talking to everyone, the board members and VP, and getting them all spun up. Everybody's an expert on this, even though they know very little here. So getting organizational alignment on how we should do that is non-trivial. And we've got a couple approaches to that, but it's one of the things where we see companies that have approved budgets, they have open recs, and they still aren't going forward yet because they don't have organizational alignment.
That's amazing. Well, Ben, as we talk about solutions, why don't we turn the camera directly on how we've used it internally here at Rackspace in and around semantic search?
Absolutely. That is sort of a big use case for many enterprises. And so much like most organizations, we at Rackspace have a lot of information regarding products, policies, procedures, scattered throughout all our different digital assets. And so, for example, if we have a new salesperson that wants to know about our products, we will point them in lots of different places versus asking the question, tell me about our VMware solution set for manufacturing. Yeah. And so that's an example of this notion of we have lots of enterprise knowledge. We have lots of people, just like most organizations, churning, so they don't have the institutional knowledge of where things are. And so it's kind of like, how do you create an ombudsman that someone can go to get that first bit of information in a way that has a level of curation? And so that's sort of the use case is how do you start threading that together from a semantic search sort of capability. So as builders, we are an engineering company. We as soon as the Gen AI train started running, we've been involved since day one, several years ago. So we started building these things, and as most organizations have, there's lots of people playing. So we said, we've got to organize this, and the problem we're trying to solve is how do we leverage the enterprise knowledge so more people have access to it in a way that makes them much more efficient. Yeah. And so we started putting the semantic search in place that can help them do that.
And along came the intelligent co-pilot for the enterprise.
There you go. We call it ICE.
That's right. My favorite thing about this is Gen AI allows us to use the advice that we either received as toddlers or we give to toddlers. And here's my example I use all the time. And that is any kid who gets, they stub their toe, they get hurt, and they're upset. They're freaking out, and they can't express through the tears what the problem is, what's the hurt. And what do the parents say? Use your words. Now, We don't have to send them to 15 different websites to go assimilate this information themselves. They can use their words. Tell me about the latest in software-defined data centers and get that data back.
The just sort of the ease of use factor
Yeah.
is and it is just such a relief for our knowledge workers, right? That I could actually get an answer
Yep.
is amazing. And I can guarantee most enterprises of any scale, they have this problem.
Every enterprise has this
Every
problem.
enterprise has this problem. And if we can just get everyone just a wee bit more productive, that is amazing with the content that you have.
Yeah.
In a
That's right.
trained, with all security, all those kind of controls. It's a safe environment.
Yeah. Now, Reagan, Dana asked a question, and I already said we're not going to cover, how do we do some of the base layer things, but she brings up an interesting point, and that is how do you get organizational alignment, because that's not a one and done, is it?
No, definitely isn't. I think one of the critical elements, I talked about this a little bit earlier, is scoping. One of the biggest areas that I see really keeping people from moving into production and actually leveraging this is how well these systems and solutions perform. And it usually is a lack of scoping and a lack of design and a lack of that alignment up front on what decision workflows are we supporting with this solution. And that actually keeps people from moving out of the pilot phase and into production, because if you don't hit a certain threshold of performance, you don't want to move forward. And usually these things perform really well if they're kind of specifically focused or trained on very specific decision workflows. So an example I give quite often is with customer service support. So there's lots of different use cases around customer service and querying for information. But if we just focus on one specific type of reason or inquiry that customers are contacting us, like billing or refunds, we can scope down and actually build something a lot more useful than these really generalized, unscoped use cases that people are trying to solve all the problems and all the things and all the reasons that people are contacting your company. And so honestly, one of the biggest issues I see moving into production, there's two. There's one is the scoping and performance element, and the second is security and data privacy concerns. And so moving into a production system, not wanting to get into one of the headline news articles around your chatbot doing something incorrectly or providing incorrect information to your external customers. So those are really kind of the two areas, and you can fix some of the data privacy concerns and data security concerns with scoping as well.
That's really good.
If I could just jump on that,
Yeah.
Jeff, just one quick question. So as we were building, this broad notion of semantic search, right? What we found was that that you got a lot more value if you became pointed at the use cases you were putting in. Now think about it. We're creating a platform that enables specific use cases. And that's the way we're thinking about this. How do we create a platform that enables specific use cases? So for example, when you think about contracts within an enterprise, contract summary, contract management, so that if someone wanted to say, hey, I'm doing, what about this contract, which is, 300 pages long, summarize it for me, to at least start the conversation, that's huge. And so what we found is as we were talking to different user groups, every function had different kind of specific needs. And so we started going down the road, and that's why we have contract sort of summary and management. That's why we now have sort of HR in terms of, hey, questions for interviews. We now are building, based on the semantic search platform, specific bespoke use cases that folks can use. That is like the easy button for something I do that's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, very good. Now, Paul, you had said something earlier. Actually, two things for you. You said something earlier that a lot of the majority of the POCs that happened last year were happening inside of Azure. I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit as to why and such.
Sure, yeah. I mean, our research, Jeff, showed that most companies are trying to figure this out. Boards were very interested in getting their own OpenAI pilot. We know 3 cases where the technical team wanted to use open source, but they didn't want to take that to the board because the board wanted OpenAI. So that was a safe one. Yeah. But, there's legitimate concerns about security and data governance, and that's why most companies went through that. We're experienced through Open Azure. One of the things that Microsoft's done well is identification. There's $20+ billion of lawsuits against OpenAI because they've sucked up everything in the internet, including PII information, violated terms of service from Getty and others, and broken a lot of copyright. And IBM has indemnified all that. The second thing they've done well is they allow, they're certainly stronger in enterprise than some of the other cloud providers, and they've allowed them to really use their existing trust framework or, extended firewall for that, which has really helped ease some executives' concern about data security and privacy.
Very interesting. Thanks for that. Now, we're also here to talk more about specific examples. So I believe you've brought one for us as well to talk about an AI-based solution.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're quite excited about, the company's called Get Jerry. They've raised, I think, $200 or $300 million out in the Valley. They're an auto car insurance marketplace, but it's heavy data centric on the phone. And the problem they had was last May, they were doing quite well and were getting 200,000 text message customer support queries a month. And most of those were taking them 24 to plus hours to respond to because they were building up the customer support process here. They rolled out a chatbot that was based on Open API in the back, multiple layers on multiple agents underneath it. And within 60 days, they were able to reduce that down to 100% of the customers getting some answer back and 50 to 60% of those being satisfied with the large language model, the robot-driven one here. So it's been a smashing success. It's been a 400% ROI. It was a small team, six people on the team, saving $4 million a year. And because they're growing so fast, it's really allowing them to see a scalability factor and getting operating leverage that they haven't had before. So what started like a really interesting pilot with executive support, they quickly moved it into a control pilot and then quickly into full production because it was so transformative. And we continue to see, after software coding, customer support is the killer app we see out there. And that's where most of the investment's going in our research.
That's incredible. Now, Reagan, the size of that team was pretty small. Is that consistent in what you've seen as far as those core AI teams inside of these projects?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even in the enterprise, it's not like you have these massive groups of people who are building these solutions. They may have some sort of like center of excellence that's building out these solutions. And so I think it's what's really interesting too is you're getting almost like a decentralization motion of building some of these AI solutions. I think Noel Russell talked about this concept of build, boost, and buy, because there's kind of this gray area in between now where the builders are these, AI groups or data scientists or technical teams that are building off of either OpenAI's API, or they're using Hugging Face, like an open source model, and they're actually building their own platforms internally. You've got this boosting motion, which is something like the Microsoft Copilot Studio, which allows people in a no-code, low-code environment to actually build out something a little more custom to them and reference their SharePoint documents and reference websites, publicly available websites. And then you've got, the buy solution where you're actually going to a third-party vendor and evaluating that, and they may be leveraging some of your data from a training perspective. So there's really kind of like a spectrum happening here where Microsoft is trying to enable a lot more people inside of the organization to kind of build their own in a low-code, no-code environment. So it's really interesting just to see how much of that is getting decentralized already. And you can even build out kind of your own agent workflows inside of that studio as well. And you don't need to know how to code anything. You just need to understand kind of the basics of how it works. And, if you know Power Automate, you can kind of easily move into that domain. So that's been really interesting. And I think that adds, I know we're not going to dive into governance too much, but it does add a lot of governance challenges on top of it. Just to make sure people aren't like downloading files and uploading them into these systems and ruining kind of that permissioning ecosystem that Microsoft has put up into place.
Well, but go ahead, Paul.
Hey, I just want to piggyback on that Reagan's thing here. One of the things we're seeing a lot out there is that this technology looks a lot more like the quality movement than the SAP. I mean, I think SAP and the huge data warehouse projects were $20 million projects, huge team from a systems integrator. This is much more, I think, decentralized. Reagan, you're talking about. We think the quality movement where you had to get black belts and green belts and white belts, but you still had hard ROI, but you had dozens of projects and center of excellence is the right model as companies go through a 2 to 3 year transformation to get all these productivity gains.
Incredible. Well, Reagan, let's, you mentioned earlier wanted to talk about, first mile, last mile, and, managing the quality sure sounds like a last mile continuous process that needs to be in place.
Yeah, 100%. I think from a quality perspective, there aren't enough tools to actually evaluate the data quality and availability for these solutions before you kind of dive in. I've seen a couple of people trying to, provide some guidance on how to think about, do I have enough data? Is it the right kind of data? What kind of data do I need? And so I think there's a really big opportunity in the market actually to build solutions out to help people evaluate that. If you've got certain objectives that you're trying to hit from a solution perspective, what sort of data is there? We keep talking about indexing all of this data that these enterprises have. Well, most of that data is not very good. When you think about indexing documentation at large, how much of that documentation hasn't been touched in years?
Right.
And so you've got super conflicting information that's happening. And so I actually think that's one of the biggest problems, is that we've documented all of these things and we're trying to use that for AI. But how confusing is it that you've got this technical documentation that's super outdated with an architecture you don't even have anymore, and you're going to query it for information? So I think that's part of the problem that people are running into right now, is that the data is not good. And so when you get to this piloting phase, you might have kind of refined it down to this really nice data set. And then when you try to productionalize it, you run into a lot of quality issues.
Yeah, huge. Now let's get into, Reagan, a real quick solution that you've brought to the table that you want to talk about.
So I guess perfect segue into what we're doing. So we at Align AI, we are building an adoption and governance platform for data and AI. And part of that is helping organizations not only identify, but scope use cases that are strategically aligned to their organizational initiatives. And so we've kind of flipped the paradigm a little bit on its head in terms of Gen AI. Most people are thinking about it from a querying perspective. So I am trying to extract information from another system. We're kind of using it to actually capture information about the organization and organize it in a way that's going to be useful for that organization. So instead of the user actually querying and asking it questions, the Copilot actually asks you questions and starts to extract really critical information, business strategic information, operational information, to try to gain some of the context that it needs to actually build out these use cases and identify, is this an automation use case? Is this an AI use case? Is it a Gen AI use case? What sort of risks might we be able to identify around a use case like this? How might we scope it to de-risk it? How strategically aligned is it? What sort of workflows will it support? So we have our kind of use case Copilot, is what we're calling it, inside of our platform, that actually helps non-technical users be a little more educated on how to identify those use cases and provide the business opportunities that the Copilot needs to craft them.
Well, it's one of those things I think that AI does so well when you built it in that context, and that is you need to take people to that moment of the art. I call it the art of the possible. What questions can I ask? What is capable here? But when you have the machine prodding you, then it gets, they ask one question, it makes you think of 5 answers in 5 different areas. So I love that. Welcome back, Ben. Glad the interwebs are happy with you again.
I paid my bill.
Good man. Good man. Now, we talk about AI a lot in the context of Gen AI. And Gen AI, as we know, going to, fill in the blank, ChatGPT or, bing.com/chat, and typing in a question and getting a thing back. But AI, of course, is not a new technology, and there are a lot of different ways to think about it. At Rackspace, we kind of divide things up into what we would call either a Copilot-based environment. Thank you, Microsoft, for the naming, where you've got this capability sitting next to you that you can ask questions of and enable you in doing what you do. The second is agent-based, where you have a semi-autonomous sort of tool behind the scenes that's doing work on behalf of the organization. And the example that I brought to share today is a Rackspace example, because a lot of people don't realize, that Rackspace is a home of fanatical support, and the vision is that behind the scenes there is a human who's going to answer every single question. Well, that is really not scalable, and we want to do it in the most efficient way possible. And the result is, if we look at the business outcome of what we ultimately put together, is our company on a financial model looks more like a software-based company than it does around a service company, because of the scale that we've been able to achieve by using AI ops and ML ops. So that behind the scenes, when we get a ticket, whether that ticket is system generated or whether it is user generated, up to 75% of all of those tickets are solved through a machine. Meaning they're gonna interpret that challenge, that issue, that whatever it is, and then they're going to take action on that if they've been given license to do just that and solve the problem. Some cases, you think about web servers, we need to bounce the stack, we need to do whatever, patching, all sorts of other areas. So we're able to go out and actually solve these problems without having to bring the humans in. Now that makes you think, hey, what are you doing with all the cool humans? Well, we're giving them really hard problems to solve, which is what our technical rackers want anyway. They don't want to be bouncing web servers. They want to be doing the hard, challenging things. And these types of solutions, Reagan, to your point of how do we rein in the data, how do we rein in the use cases and these sorts of things, it allows us to get pretty tight boundaries of where and how this system can operate, which has allowed us to be really quite successful with it because good boundaries are always a good thing. Paul, I'm really interested, as we're getting towards the end of our time here, I'm really interested in your opinion of, you've already said that 2023 was the year of try and sit on it. That's my interpretation of a POC that never goes anywhere. What does 2024 look like, even as we're now in May?
I think it really varies by industry. We have a framework out there called WINS, but shows some industries like Hollywood, they had strikes last year. This is a year one. We didn't have strikes the first year of the internet or the metaverse or blockchain. So industries that are really being transformed, insurance, legal, software development, entertainment, they have business imperative to invest this year, because if they don't, they're going to be the caboose in their industries. Other firms, steel manufacturing and others that are much more physical based, where the value is, it can wait a little bit and it'll get marginal. So that's probably the first thing. The second thing is we're seeing continued really internal alignment. Last year there weren't a lot of AI signed leaders. That's a VP who's in charge, and the titles all over the board here. Chief Digital Officer, Chief Data Officer, a few times Chief AI Officer, but that's all changing this year. So this year is going to be in production pilots in those industries under most strain. And those industries and a handful of other industries will all have now assigned leaders with budgets really doing pilots. And I think next year we're really going to see explosion of in production systems.
That's pretty amazing. Now, Reagan, you seem to agree with that, given the nodded head. And I allowed you to discuss the part of the thing you wanted, and that was last mile. Let's talk first mile in an AI project for a second. How does somebody, if they're thinking, I want to get on this bandwagon, how do they get after it?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of go back to the use case identification and scoping exercise, because when you don't identify how these things are going to be used, you're going to have a really hard time building it, piloting it, making sure that it goes live. And so we do what we call kind of like a project canvas, which outlines all the different stakeholders and the performance levels and the risks and the data that we need and the techniques we're going to use. And so it's a very organized process that you go through, and when you're hitting a certain threshold of performance that is acceptable by the business, and what sort of risks are that you need to monitor and watch out for. And so you kind of have to think of the end in mind when you're starting. And I know that a lot of this stuff is still experimentation based. And so there's a lot of bottom up initiatives still happening. Like, what can we do? What is interesting? That is important, but it needs to be balanced with things that are more intentional. And I think we're going to start to see that more and more later this year, if not next year. Plus the industry is already establishing a ton around really good use cases that are working, that you can just kind of, the fast followers can copy and start to do internally. I think what's going to be really interesting is I keep seeing kind of these generalized use cases versus the differentiated ones. So the differentiated ones that are differentiated by the company and differentiated by the industry, that are a little bit more unique, versus the really generalized ones like customer service and customer success that every company can take advantage of. And so I think we'll see a lot more of those going into production, because there's going to be more precedent set in the industry on how to handle them and how to scope them and how to build them. And then, a little bit more interesting piloting happening in the kind of unique territory.
Right. Now, Ben, Rackspace is helping to lead the industry, the tech industry, in and around sustainability. And AI is absolutely one of those areas. Can you give us 30 or 45 seconds on how AI can help make it a greener world, make it a better place?
Yeah, so there's a couple things, right? When we talk about the globe, that's a lot of data. And so what AI can do is one, help us to understand and synthesize the data about what's actually happening in the world, right? AI can help us understand then how to become much more efficient in our operations to reduce the amount of sort of consumption in the world. So I think those are two of and then there's this notion of AI can help us develop new technology, for example, carbon scrubbing technologies, right? And so if we can get better at sort of developing new products as a result of AI and sort of the insights for folks, those are all wins. So those are some ways that AI can help drive sustainability. Right. And folks, last week was Earth Week, so let's the world is last year was the hottest summer on record, and so sustainability is an issue we have to take very seriously.
That's right. Let's build on last week's momentum and not leave it last week. Paul, lastly, over to you. You and your analyst organization, are you seeing sustainability in the questions that you're getting as well, and how somebody can balance their goals and sustainability with also pursuing AI?
Yeah, no, I think two things. One, I think the energy needs of all this AI is breathtaking. It's shocking everyone, and it's not slowing down. I think that's one. I think two, the sustainability movement has really brought this on the radar screen of boards and executives, and I'm seeing healthy concern for and looking for solutions out there. I think the good news is there are going through providers like Rackspace's other help, but also we're seeing tremendous innovation on the model side. So we're going to be quickly moving to models that are much smaller. They're smaller models, local models. Every phone 12 to 18 months is going to have its own large local LLM on it. So I think there's a lot. So awareness is, let me be more clear. Awareness is good. I think solutions are coming out there already for hosted. And three, the energy demand for incremental models is going down.
Fantastic. All right, you guys have seen the QR code pop up on the screen because next week the AI discussion continues. We've gone out and interviewed over 1,420 IT decision makers in 10 different countries across a myriad of different industries, and we're going to unpack those findings next week. So there on the screen in the chat is a link where you can go and find that information and subscribe and sign up. Not subscribe. You can sign up for that event. It is next. When is it? It's the 7th. It's next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central Time. It's an hour-long program, ton of information to share. Reagan's going to be back. We've got our own CTO and President of Technology, Srini Kaushik, will be here as well. So I'd love to be able to see each of you next Tuesday at 10 a.m. All right, we are about out of time. So what we're going to do now, folks, is bring up, how people can reach each of you and your companies. And Paul, I think we'll start with you. Let's just get a couple of seconds on your organization, what you guys do specifically, and how people can reach out.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you can find more information about us at gaiinsights.com. We help the assigned aid leader and their teams, as well as investors. We provide employee and executive briefings, benchmarking services, so you can understand your benchmarking, prioritization services. We also last year published the first corporate buyer's guide to large language models, 90-page report. It's been very well received as well. And then we have a big annual conference here in Boston in October 7 and 8 that is only enterprise case studies.
Oh, I think I'm going to sign up for that one. Fantastic. Reagan, you are here representing a couple of different organizations, your own, and then, of course, the Women in Analytics. Why don't you tell us about both of those, please?
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned, Align AI is an adoption and governance platform for data and AI, specifically for the enterprise. You can check out more information about us at getalignai.com. And then for Women in Analytics, we have 2 conferences coming up. One next week. I will be in Portland, Oregon next week with the team hosting an event. So if you're out there on the West Coast and you're interested in attending, it's on the 8th. And then we have one in July as well. We're about to announce our 3rd and final keynote, who is absolutely incredible. So excited for that. So definitely check us out and buy a ticket. It's in July, and it's in Columbus, Ohio. So that's our global event. There will be about 1,500 people there in attendance, all women and non-binary speakers. And so check out our topics. We have a new track for business users, AI business users. So if you're not technical and really interested in learning how to take advantage of AI, check out the track for you specifically.
Fantastic. Now, Ben, we're co-workers, but you also represent CDO Magazine as an editor. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, CDO Magazine is the world's leading resource for CDOs globally. I think there's about several 100,000 users, readers globally. The CDO Magazine Summit is in September and will be in Cincinnati. That's one of their summits. And so we'll probably have, I don't know, 700 people there, CDOs all over the globe. And we've got CDOs on our editorial board from probably 50 different countries.
All right. Fantastic. And of course, the show's brought to you by the Foundry for AI at Rackspace, or as we like to call it, FAIR. If you'd like to learn more, you can just head over to fair.rackspace.com or scan the fancy QR code that's been up on your screen or about to pop back up. And we'd be happy to help you either identify, where you are in the journey, help come alongside of you and help you adopt AI as a force multiplier for your organization to be more efficient, more creative, and increase quality and lower errors. All the fun things that companies want. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of our program today. Paul, it's been a pleasure having you here. I do so hope you will come back and visit with us. Reagan, we'll see you next week at the Big Solve Summit. Everyone, I hope to see you there. And Ben, of course, couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. Everyone, have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll see you back on AI and You on the first Tuesday of June, whatever date that is. We'll see you there.
All right. Take care, everyone.